Hey y'all, I'm Jerdy, and Blizzard just announced that Phase 7 of Season of Discovery goes live January 28th, and we're going to talk about it right now. I want to open this with a question to y'all. Do you think this is too soon? I know AQ is like everyone's least favorite raid, and it wasn't exactly a good launch in Season of Discovery, but I think total it's like 11 lockouts until Naxxramas, which seems to be really short compared to the other phases. And I don't know about y'all, but our Paladin Druid tier drop rate has been pretty doo-doo until like last week. So I know a lot of us are still farming for our BIS tier slots. I know some people might want to be just ready to get out of AQ and go right into Nax, and people are taking breaks until Nax. But let me know what you think about this release date down in the comments. But let's go on with the announcements. So that first week on January 28th, we'll be getting the Karazhan Crypts Dungeon and the Scourge Invasion. It's really weird to think about this. The Karazhan Crypts has been like a mysterious, unknown thing in World of Warcraft since WoW's existence. People have wall jumped through the original Karazhan Crypts to see what was down there, and people have always wondered what was supposed to be here. Was there ever anything planned for this area? And fast forward 20 years later, and we're getting its first ever live in-game iteration in Season of Discovery of all places. This guinea pig experimental version of the game will be the first ever version to get the Karazhan Crypts. That alone merits a lot of hype for SOD. What's also interesting is when you read this, it seems to mimic that of a heroic dungeon like Wrath of the Lich King or the Burning Crusade, and that it's going to have a 24-hour lockout, meaning you can only do it once a day. And this first sentence right here says, designed to be a challenge for well-geared players. This sentence also goes on to say, it will introduce a new darkness mechanic that requires players to group up and stay within the light if they want to avoid hidden hazards within. When I read that, I instantly thought of the Dark Flame Cleft dungeon in the War Within, Retail WoW's current expansion. If you don't play Retail or didn't play the War Within at launch, you literally have to follow this cart that has a light around it near the end of the dungeon, and if you go too far from the light, you'll die. So what's different in this version is that unique challenges or stuff to discover, according to this last sentence right here, are available outside of the light, at least if I'm reading that correctly. I'm wondering if it's going to be like this exact mechanic, because it does say unique and new. So if it is that, it wouldn't exactly be unique and new. Although I do think that dungeon in Retail was pretty fun doing it for the first time. They'll also have an attunement that starts in Light's Hope Chapel. How long is an attunement? We don't know yet. And up here, it says some pretty interesting things. Facing the dangers that lurk within, investigating puzzles, and uncover the secrets deep in the halls and cavernous tunnels. This seems really hype, and I do hope it poses a challenge. I'm going to assume it does, since this well-geared players phrase is right here. I would assume well-geared players means people who are near or in their current BIS in AQ. So if that's true, then we are in for a unique 5-man actual challenge. I do want to note, I did mention some pretty significant spoilers in a previous video when stuff was data mined on Wowhead. I feel like for the first time in a while, this is something y'all might want to try and go in blind and not data mine. It seems very phase 1 hype for me on how cool this could be. So if you do want to avoid spoilers and go into this completely blind, stray away from some of the data mining that is available right now on Wowhead. Next, let's talk about the Scourge Invasion. This was also present in original Classic back in 05 and in 19. However, in those versions of the game, it was a limited time event before Naxxramas came out. What made this event so hype was that during these events, you could farm necrotic runes during the invasions when they were happening, and get some of your BIS consumables for Naxxramas, being melee's consecrated sharpening stones and caster's blessed wizard oil. But in Season of Discovery, this will be a permanent event, so you can always farm for these consumes throughout the rest of SOD once this phase is live. I kind of figured they would do this, because it seems appropriate for a seasonal server to have an event like this not be so temporary. And then, of course, the following week after, February 6th, we will be getting what seems to be the penultimate raid of Season of Discovery, and I'll talk about that in a second, Naxxramas. The description here reads, tuned for 20 players, you can venture into these hallowed halls with up to 40 players, take on the terrors within, and reap the rewards with new mechanics and added empowered difficulty. Let's stop there. Are these going to be actual new mechanics? Are these bosses revamped? Or is it going to be similar to getting Season of Mastery mechanics with maybe one new thing you don't don't really notice. I'm, of course, throwing shade to Major Domo, how he was just a Season of Mastery boss with one new Soak Bubble mechanic. That was new, I guess. It just, who cared about that, right? We saw the empowered difficulty on the first iteration of the PTR. Unfortunately, that PTR back before the holidays, I heard was extremely buggy and almost unplayable apparently. So I'm hoping that in this new PTR that we're getting this week, that you can test this weekend, that a lot of those issues are fixed and we can actually test a raid and report hopefully minimal bugs to Blizzard to get this fixed before February 6th. But it goes on to say, you'll discover sanctified gear, which can be improved with the new Seal of the Dawn trinket to take on the dangers in Naxxramas at the highest difficulty. Sounds like something similar to the Time Worn gear we have in AQ right now, but in Naxxramas. Players will also receive more loot drops when a quarter is empowered, including new cosmetic items for your collection. So it seems like they're going back to their ways of Blackwing Lair and Molten Core, where the hard modes will reward more loot, not like AQ, where you can only get up to, I think, 2 actual items from doing all the hard modes. I guess it wasn't a well-received change in AQ like they thought it would be. This last sentence, though, has me the most hype. Within the Frostworm Lair, raid bosses Sapphiron and Kel'Thuzad will have more secrets to uncover when all bosses are defeated at their highest difficulty. And I have no idea what that means. Does that just mean new mechanics? I figured they would just say new mechanics like they said here, or does it mean something more? I guess we'll find out February 6th. Next, we're going to talk about some major announcements that were announced yesterday, including this one right here. The Real Vendor now sells all Tier 1 and half of your Tier 2 tokens. The Tier 2 slots being your wrists, waist, hands, and feet. This is huge for your alts that you just really don't want to gear and you really don't want to bring them to those pug Blackwing Lairs or Molten Cores where people are somehow doing less damage than they were doing in Phase 3. So now you can farm dungeons and still farm those Nightmare Pugs to get reals, so you know that eventually, no matter what, you're gonna get some tier in your hand. What's interesting though is this developer note stating they have no current plans to further expand raid equipment to the Real Vendor, which is interesting because I was actually going to make a video talking about things they should add in Phase 7, and that was going to be one of those things. If you've played classic Wrath of the Lich King a few years back, you know they did something similar to this after Ulduar, where there was a vendor that had some of your best gear that dropped in Ulduar 10-man. They did this during Trial of the Grand Crusader, where people could farm dungeons to get tokens for like Bish trinkets, their weapons, necklaces. So I figured since they've already done something like that, maybe they would do it in SOD with like your Biss Blackwing Lair trinket, think DFT, Stylene's, Rejuve gem for a high amount of reals. But apparently that's never going to happen. I'm not saying it's a bad thing. It just cancels out the idea of me thinking that would happen. And some other things, Cthulhu now drops one more item in all difficulties. Thorn's effects will now log correctly into the combat log, and this one's pretty big. Many AQ crafting patterns have had the required materials reduced. And I think this is pretty late, to be honest, but better late than never, I guess. If you watched my videos before, I stated this like a month ago that this should have happened, because needing 30 large obsidian shards when their drop rate was so low to make your Biss tank trinket was insane. Again, better late than never, just kind of sucks for the people who already farmed it, right? And that's it from me, you guys. Let me know how you feel about these announcements down in the comments below. Are you hyped? Are you excited? If you're interested in trying out SOD and you haven't tried it yet, now is the perfect time, as there are people leveling and you can get all your runes at level 1 and just go crazy with the experiments and trying out wacky stuff as you get to level 60. It's a lot faster than Classic is right now. I'm not dissing Classic. It just is a lot faster, and you can hit 60 pretty fast and then farm dungeons to get at least a full set of Tier 1. But as always, thanks for stopping by. Thanks for saying hi. Subscribe if you're new to the channel and you like classic WoW content. I do SOD and Classic, and I am a Prot Paladin main in SOD, and I'm the guide writer for Prot Paladins in SOD. Also, side note, I'm also the guide writer now for the Rogues for WoW Classic Fresh and Prot Paladin Classic Fresh. So that's pretty cool. And as always, I'll see y'all in the next video.